October the 2nd, 1997. Retired Air Force Captain Jorunge Hollander was in his house in Cabo Frio, Brazil. The former pilot and parachutist retired in 1992. He suffered with illness ever since.
Captain Hollander had been suffering a chronic depressive disorder since the early 1990s. In my personal view, this depressive process originated from something that he had experienced a long time ago in the Amazon.
That night, Hollander got ready for bed. Later that evening, his daughter climbed the stairs to her father's room. She found a horrific scene. Just 2 months earlier, the captain had given this exclusive interview to UFO researchers A.J. Javert and Marco Petit. Both men study and document UFO incidents.
This object went to Colares. Then it kept going, as if it covered the Amazon in strips. There was an intelligence doing this. 4 months into the operation, they ordered us to stop.
Some UFO experts maintain that Captain Hollander did not kill himself, but was murdered because he'd said too much about a series of frightening UFO encounters, some allegedly fatal, which took place in the Amazon jungle 20 years earlier.
He gave eyewitness testimony based on his work as a military man who commanded one of the most serious operations in the world of ufology. There's something very strange that the Air Force didn't want revealed.
I don't believe it was suicide. Hollander's death is connected to something beyond the normal.
He left a very clear message that we are being visited.
Captain Hollander's UFO sightings began here, on the island of Colares, at the mouth of the Amazon River in Brazil. Though it's only a 2-hour drive from the bustling city of Belém, it is a world away in terms of culture and technology.
They're poor people. They're fishermen and farmers, people who lead a very peaceful life.
Like most people in Brazil, the 2,000 residents of Colares are predominantly Roman Catholic. But the island's remoteness had given rise to many local superstitions.
They believe the island is mysterious, that a lot of phenomena occur there. The people of Colares have their legends and their traditions.
"78-year-old Emílio Campos Oliveira is a long-time resident on the island. Nearly 30 years ago, he was part of an extraordinary and disturbing series of events that transformed life on Colares forever.
I could feel it once the light went away. I felt the burning. It was here. The mark was kind of a circle. It was red in the middle of a black spot.
It began on a warm night in October 1977. By 11 p.m., Oliveira was ready for bed. He kissed his wife goodnight and retired to a hammock in the living room where he liked to sleep. Suddenly, a beam of light flooded his room. It appeared to be coming from above. It was so powerful that it penetrated the ceramic tiles of the roof.
A bright light appeared before my eyes, coming down from the ceiling on top of me. It attacked my thigh. I felt a burning sensation. The light was quite bright.
As quickly as it came, the light disappeared. Unable to find an explanation for what had happened, he tried going back to sleep. Days later, at about 8 p.m., 24-year-old Orivaldo Malaquias Pinheiro, a local fisherman, set out with a friend for some night fishing.
I was on the beach, and we were throwing out the net, but the net wasn't catching anything. So we pulled it back in and left to see if we could find another position, to see where we could catch some fish.
The two fishermen waited patiently for their catch. Pinheiro's friend noticed a low, flying, bright light in the sky.
There was no noise, no smell. He looked out to the sea, and this light was coming from the direction of the sea towards us. We got scared and ran.
The two men raced toward the town. Panic-stricken, they told other residents about what they'd just seen. They discovered that they were not the only ones to experience these mysterious sightings. Dozens of people claimed that over the past few weeks, they'd been chased, as if they were being hunted down and attacked by the lights. "25-year-old dentist Lucia Helena Marquez said that she'd also had a strange encounter on a nearby beach.
We
were at the market and there was a commotion. An object appeared and everyone ran to the seashore. We saw two lights hovering in the air. One light would be on and the other was off. They kept doing it, like a signal. The colours that we saw were mostly red. It was the brightest colour. Then green and yellow in the background. Then it just disappeared.
As residents of Colares struggled to make sense of these strange occurrences, 2 hours away in Belém, 25-year-old reporter Carlos Mendes received a call.
I first heard pieces of information through telephone calls from people linked to the town. They were saying that the newspaper should go there because these lights were appearing and people were becoming very afraid.
Mendes, who works for the local newspaper, phoned his photographer. The two men left for Colares that night. When they arrived, the men were swarmed by residents wanting to tell their stories about being attacked by strange beams of light. Some even said they had been wounded by the lights.
One woman was in her house at night when suddenly she saw the brightness. She noticed that the light was shining on her house. It pierced the roof and lit up the bedroom.
The woman said that her legs and arms were paralyzed, and the next day she noticed something strange on her chest.
On her chest, there were marks as if someone had perforated her breast a number of times in the same place with a pin.
Other alleged victims told similar stories. They said that whilst they were immobilized by the light, they felt as if it was somehow sucking their blood. Reporter Carlos Mendes never saw the lights. He didn't know what to make of the bizarre stories, but saw how frightened the people were.
I noticed a lot of fear in those humble people. It was a sign that something very bad was happening.
Over the next 2 months, the sightings increased and panic swept the island. Over 80 people reported being targeted by the intense beams of light.
A história era sempre a mesma.
The stories were always the same. The lights came down from space, sucked on these people, paralyzed and affected them. They couldn't understand why they were being attacked, but they said they were attacked violently. So I was trying to understand why it was happening, and if the lights were really appearing to these people.
Se aquilo realmente estava aparecendo para todas as pessoas.
The locals became so alarmed that many of the children and women left the town. Some men would light bonfires along the beach and stand guard at night. Others stayed locked in their homes for fear of being targeted.
Mas não vi. Agora vi o pavor.
I saw the people's fear. I saw the feeling of terror that these people had. And I saw the plea for help that the people were making.
Socorro, aquelas pessoas estavam pedindo.
It seemed as if someone or something was attacking the people of Colares. No one knew why. September 1977. Panic had spread in the remote Brazilian island of Colares, 68 miles north of Belém. Dozens of residents claimed that they had been attacked by strange beams of light emitted by unidentified objects in the sky. At that time, Dr. Valaide Carvalho was the 24-year-old director of the local healthcare unit. She'd been on the island for only 6 months. A few days after the sightings, the young doctor saw an increase in her patient load, many of whom claimed they had been injured by the unexplained lights.
People kept turning up, and I was getting irritated because I thought that it was getting to be too much, that it was mass hallucination. It was mass delirium. I had more and more cases. I remained skeptical, thinking they'd all gone crazy for some reason.
The symptoms the doctor saw were all the same. The patients displayed what appeared to be radiation burns, as well as unusual puncture marks. Physician Daniel Rubiso studied the events on Colares.
The marks were generally at the thorax level, shoulders, chest, cases on the thigh, the leg, and generally the burn was small. It wasn't very extensive, a maximum of 15 centimeters in diameter. Dr. Valaide observed small papillas, as if there were 2 small injections in the location of the wound.
Victims reported that these burns were caused when the light made contact with their skin. But the wounds were unlike any burns the young doctor had treated before.
The marks caused by the burns suddenly turned black, as if they were burns that had been around for 10 days or so. However, many times it had only been 10 minutes since they were made.
The doctor's most disturbing cases were yet to emerge. In September, she examined a woman whom relatives claim had been attacked inside her house by a bright light.
Her family members carried her in. She was already in a state of spasm, as if she was having cardiac arrest. Her mouth was shut tight, her eyes were closed. She had no reflexes at all.
Carvalho tried to stabilize the woman's condition, but there was no sign of improvement.
There was nothing more that we could do. The only thing left was to put her in a car, since we didn't have an ambulance, and drive her to Belém.
Carvalho waited for an update on the woman's condition. 5 days later, another serious case was brought to her clinic. A woman who witnesses say was hit by a strong beam of light while standing in her garden.
She arrived in a squad car in such a profound state of rigidity that they couldn't fold her into the car, and she came laying on the back seat with her legs sticking out because they couldn't bend them in.
Cavallo sent that patient to the city as well. Soon the doctor received word from the regional hospital in Belém about her patients. They were both dead.
I had requested that the cause of death be determined because it was of interest to the community, and the cause of death was listed as unknown.
Cavallo didn't believe that beams of light attacked her patients, but she suspected that the growing hysteria over the sightings may have led to a heart attack or stroke. Hoping to put an end to the panic, Cavallo and other town officials begged the mayor for help. In September, the mayor contacted the Regional Air Command of the Brazilian Air Force, or COMAR. It was at this point that COMAR assigned Captain Urangue Hollander to lead a team of Air Force officers in an investigation of the strange events on the island. According to reporter Carlos Mendes, who was researching the events on Colares, Hollander's team may have been dispatched because the area had been the site of repeated guerrilla attacks by communist rebels. He thought that the Air Force assumed the lights were being created by weapon fire in the jungle, and Hollander's job was to track down the rebels.
I believe that the primary objective of the military in Colares was to investigate if there was any subversive activity from communist agents.
But if that was the case, the project was given a curious name. Captain Hollander's mission was known as Operation Saucer. He gathered his team quickly. 37-year-old civilian Pinon Freyes was brought on as a pilot.
There was suspicion that it was a type of device that was violating Brazilian airspace. We didn't know what country it was from, but it was something that was violating our airspace. The Air Force is obliged to investigate.
At the beginning of September, Hollander's team of officers, engineers and scientists arrive at Colares. The men put up shelters and set up telescopes and cameras on nearby beaches. Their activities were carried out in full view of the island's residents, in the hope of calming the fear that had gripped the island.
When we arrived in Colares, there was total panic in the town. The population wasn't sleeping because of the fear. Despite attempts to calm them down, we couldn't do it, especially the older residents, some of whom had been affected by the lights.
Once on Colares, the Operation Saucer team tried to gather as much information as possible. Captain Hollander immediately went to see Dr. Cavallo.
The Air Force entourage arrived at 6 o'clock in the morning. They told me to tell the community from that point on that all these cases of affected people were mass hysteria.
For the doctor, the meeting was a sign that the Air Force was not interested in seeking the truth, but covering it up instead. Cavallo refused to go along with their plan.
I couldn't trick a community that expected so much from me, especially support and credibility.
Hollander also met up with local eyewitnesses, including Emidio Campos Oliveira, who was 48 at the time. A resident who had been burned on his thigh by the light.
They came to see me. They photographed where I was hit. The only ones who saw my mark were people from the Air Force. They saw the mark.
The sightings continued throughout the next 4 months. Captain Hollander's team was busy collecting information from witnesses and town officials. Their surveillance equipment was in use 24 hours a day, but the Air Force did not release their findings to the public. Those who thought that Operation Saucer would help determine the truth were disappointed. Instead, some believed a cover-up had already begun.
The military did not take weapons to Colares. Their weapons were photographic cameras, lots of photographic cameras.
Over a 4-month period, Hollander and his team took photos and made sketches. These are their actual drawings. They also conducted interviews with the residents, including Dr. Vilaidi Carvalho. She had treated dozens of patients who claimed they had been attacked. Initially, the doctor was skeptical about their stories, but soon she experienced a UFO sighting herself. It was around 6 o'clock. Carvalho was on her way home from her shift at the local healthcare unit when she saw a woman faint.
I looked up. Something I had denied and didn't believe in, that I thought was the product of delirium, craziness, made-up stories, people wanting attention. I saw the object at the height of approximately a 10-story building.
The object was cylindrical. Carvalho suddenly felt paralyzed by what she saw.
It didn't have the color of stainless steel or silver, nor the color of anything else. It had its own color, and it moved in elliptical movements. It was directly over my head and was coming back again.
According to statements from witnesses, at that exact time, the Air Force picked up a signal on a radar set up on a nearby beach. As the team scrambled to focus their telescopes and cameras, the object disappeared.
It turned towards the bay and headed out to sea.
Hollander and his team continued their surveillance on Colares. They collected over 500 photographs and 15 hours of film, showing what appeared to be bright lights high in the sky. The reports from the investigation were sent back to Comar headquarters in the nation's capital of Brasilia.
The Air Force really delved into the investigation. They had to give some kind of an answer to the people that were having these encounters, and I'm certain that it came as a surprise that the military men from the Air Force themselves began having their own experiences.
In December 1977, ufologists A.J. Javert and Marco Petit were hard at work writing for the Brazilian publication UFO Magazine when they heard about the stories from Colares.
The military operation is the first military operation that we know of in Brazil and probably in the world, entirely dedicated to try to understand what was going on here involved in the UFO phenomena. Over 3,000 people were interviewed by this military in a 4-month period.
That same month, Captain Hollander was ordered to surrender all materials and return to Comar. The photographs, films, and sketches they collected were kept classified.
He was given the order to shut down the Operation Saucer immediately. He was a military, he didn't ask much question.
One of the things that most shocked me and the other colleagues was the fact that at the end of December in that year of 1977, when the encounters were becoming increasingly fruitful, the order came And to this day, no civilians know who it came from, saying that the operation was terminated.
Over the next few months, reports of strange sightings and bizarre attacks subsided. In time, the stories about mysterious lights in the sky drifted into local legend. For the next 30 years, Operation Saucer was kept under wraps. But Captain Hollander did not remain silent forever. In 1997, he decided to meet with A.J. Javert and Marco Petit in a filmed meeting just outside Rio de Janeiro. In this rarely seen footage, the captain gives a chilling account of what happened on the island.
The ship exploded like thunder. It was a very powerful, very bright explosion. It took off at an incredible speed towards the atmosphere. Then it disappeared among the stars.
In 1977, the Brazilian Air Force's UFO investigation called Operation Saucer generated an extensive report, which sat in classified government archives for over 20 years. The files contained roughly 500 photographs and 3,000 interviews with witnesses who claimed that they were attacked by bright lights in the sky over the Amazonian island of Colares. It was not until 1997 that the veil of secrecy was lifted. June 1997. Ufologist and editor of the Brazilian publication UFO magazine, A.J. Javert, was at work when he received a phone call. It was Captain Urunge Hollander. Hollander was in charge of the Air Force team sent to Colares in 1977.
And he called me and said, I always admire what you've done. I think you've done the right things. And in the past, we weren't able to talk because, you know, I was in the military. But right now, I'm retired. And if you want to talk to me, please come to my place.
Javert and his co-editor, Marco Petit, went to see Hollander. For 2 days, the three men gathered at the captain's house in Cabo Frio, just outside Rio de Janeiro. They filmed the entire meeting.
Was a man with a very lucid memory, very, very good memory, who could report in details things that happened 20-some years before, with such a precision that impressed us.
The most important part, without a doubt, is his description of the encounters he had with these ships. He came face to face with ships that sometimes were 100 meters in diameter, of varied shapes, and that really placed him in a situation that few people, in global terms, had the opportunity to witness.
We could hear a sound, like an air conditioner. That kind of dull sound. And deep inside the sound, there was a clicking noise, like the sound of a ratchet. This noise coming from the ship was very clear.
Hollander described in detail 3 different encounters with alien spaceships. These are the drawings he made to describe his first encounter. He told the researchers that his second experience occurred one evening, whilst he and his team were standing on the beach.
The light came close to us and stopped. It was high, quite high, but it stopped and actually made a circle around us. It made a circle and then took off toward the east.
The captain then described his last and most shocking encounter. He told the ufologists that he was visited by a humanoid from one of the ships whilst he was in bed.
I was lying on my side. Suddenly, a very powerful flash lit up the room. I was startled. I heard a strange thing, and immediately afterwards there was a being behind me, hugging me. It was a rather strange situation.
The captain then went on to describe the alien.
It was 1.5 meters tall, more or less, dressed in a suit resembling an astronaut or a diving suit. It was kind of soft. It wasn't very tight, and I didn't see the face. It had a mask that was lead grey, and I couldn't tell the details of the face. I didn't see it. I didn't see any eyes. I didn't see any shape.
Hollander also told the researchers that the alien spoke to him.
I was very frightened, with that thing behind me, hugging me, squeezing me, and it spoke into my ear in Portuguese. With a sound, it seems like a computer, that metallic voice. It spoke into my ear, "Take it easy, we're not going to do you any harm."
He said that the alien then disappeared.
He could tell us with such a precision what happened, and you can see that there was a great variety of objects operating in this area. Some objects, strangely, they would come from the jungle. They would come from between the trees. Some other would come from the sky, and a few others would come from the water. That's very amazing.
The captain made another startling claim. He showed the ufologists his arm. There appeared to be an object implanted under his skin. He told them that the alien put it there during his last encounter.
Flexible plastic. Here, you press it and it shows up there, at this point here.
Did you ever get it x-rayed?
Yes, but it didn't show anything.
In July 1997, Hollander's story was published in Javert and Petit's UFO magazine. But those hoping that his startling disclosure would lead to a second investigation were disappointed. Instead, a new chapter of the Colares mystery began. On October the 2nd, 1997, Captain Hollander died. The official cause of death was asphyxia, but there was suspicion as to whether the death was accidental, suicide, or perhaps even murder. According to colleagues, Hollander did have a history of mental illness and had attempted to kill himself before. Yet others who knew the captain say it could not have been suicide. His co-pilot, Pignon Freyes, suspects that he may have been murdered.
Hollander would never take his own life. Now, I can't accuse anyone of anything, but he would never tie a rope around his own neck and hang himself.
But A.J. Javert disagrees with Freyes.
He took his own life. That was his decision. He was depressed. But what I know is that that man left us a very important message, is that we are being visited. And the Brazilian Air Force, which means the Brazilian government, knows about it.
In March 2004, A.J. Javert and Marco Petit decided to take action. 6 years after the captain's death, they demanded access to the classified Colares report under a campaign they created called Freedom of UFO Information Now.
This kind of information that we are talking now, I believe, as a UFO researcher and as a citizen of Brazil, that it should not be restricted to the military files, to the military headquarters. It must be known by all society.
In the Air Force archive, Javert and Petit found the sketches and photos made by Hollander and his team. Records that have been hidden for over 30 years. On the 20th of May 2005, Brazilian ufologists A.J. Javert and Marco Petit and a handful of other UFO researchers arrived at the Brazilian Air Force headquarters to examine classified documents they had pressured the government to reveal. These files contained information about the 1977 military investigation called Operation Saucer. Javert and Petit believed the records contained data about UFO activity on the island of Colares.
The brigadier, he said, I was being given an order from the commander of the Brazilian Air Force to open to you all files. You can watch everything that you please.
But in fact, the two claimed they were not permitted to see all the documents about the incidents. These are some of the photos they examined. Out of 2,000 pages of text, 500 photographs, and over 15 hours of film, they were only permitted to view 110 photos and 200 documents. The materials were both illuminating and puzzling. They showed that the Brazilian government devoted a great deal of time investigating the sightings. They documented numerous statements given by eyewitnesses. The files contained more details than the ufologist had ever imagined. Javert and Petit were not permitted to view the films contained in the files, but they did uncover photographs taken by Captain Hollander, the head of Operation Saucer. The grainy black and white photos showed bright lights high in the night sky.
In ufology, a picture is not worth 1,000 words. You have to analyze the report of the people who took the picture.
Captain Hollander's voluminous report contains sketches and descriptions of his alleged encounters with alien aircraft.
We had access to several documents that describe the encounters in detail, including reconstructions in the form of drawings, not only of the cases that involved the military, but also the cases that involved the residents.
The documents described several different encounters with mysterious lights.
The UFOs could come closer to people, and sometimes they could get small, shrink it, or enlarge it, get lighter, like more illuminated.
The report concluded by describing the burn and puncture marks supposedly caused by the lights, but offered no proof that they were connected. The report left that and many other questions unanswered. It did not attempt to determine the source of the lights, or try to debunk the speculation that they came from alien aircraft. It seemed clear that a definitive explanation for the Colares sightings would not come from the Brazilian government. Officially, the Air Force stated that, regarding Operation Saucer, a report was produced with diverse depositions, apparently without any scientific foundation. For the time being, new information may have to come from the work of independent researchers and ufologists. Physician Daniel has studied the Colares sightings since 1985. He began his research by trying to discover other possible causes for the burn marks found on the victims.
There was a suspicion that it could have been an animal, maybe a bat. This theory was discarded because when vampire bats bite, they leave marks in the shape of an O. It's a bite and it bleeds a lot. There was no bleeding in this case.
Reviso also considered the theory that the sightings on Colares could be attributed to mass hallucination.
It was thought that it could have been mass panic, self-mutilation, that people were scratching and hurting themselves. This wasn't the case either.
Reviso's research suggested that the wounds were not self-inflicted.
What it seems is that there was very intense radiation that paralyzed the nervous system, and the light must have extracted something.
Reviso also looked into possible sources for lights that were seen on the island. At the time of the sightings, the Brazilian government was fighting communist guerrillas in the state of Para, in which Colares is located.
There was the suspicion that it might be a weapon, some clandestine maneuvers of guerrillas, using devices to frighten off the population, in order to bring in weapons, munitions, and war supplies to Para.
Despite reports of guerrilla activity, the government neither confirmed nor denied the information. Reporter Carlos Mendes, who covered the events on Colares, has no explanation for the strange lights the islanders described. But he believes that the remoteness of Colares and the superstitions of its inhabitants may have played a role in keeping the stories about UFO sightings alive.
The people were shocked, frightened. The people of Colares have always lived with legends, with folklore from the countryside. This is typical of the Amazon.
Today, the mystery remains. What was flying in the skies above Colares? And why did people think they had been attacked by beams of light?
I believe that they were extracting biological material, probably blood, so that they could create vaccines and develop some protection for their own bodies, for their own civilization. So that when the day arrived of final contact with mankind, they would no longer be susceptible to the illnesses and diseases that we humans present.
As for Captain Hollander, the head of Operation Saucer, ufologists Marco Petit and A.J. Javert are convinced that he came forward out of a sense of duty.
Hollander was convinced that he couldn't die without telling the story. It was fundamental that we hear from the main protagonist in the story, who had commanded the entire investigation. He simply said that tomorrow he could be dead. He could be dead and the truth would die with him. And evidently, he didn't want that to happen.
He left us a very important message with us. We are being visited.